Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of the 12-Week Year, Brian Moran.
Hey, good morning, Proforma. How are we? Good, good. So WAS was fun last night, huh? Getting a little backstory there of Apple. Well, I'm excited to be able to spend some time with you. When Greg first reached out to me and we started talking about this, I got excited. And I got excited because he was telling me about you. And I don't know if you know this, but you're different. Now, he didn't say that. I'm saying you're different. And you're different, you knew that, right? You're different in a good way. One of the things I love about business owners and entrepreneurs is that they're always looking for ways to get better. Would you agree with that? Does that describe you? Yeah. And I like that because that's the way I'm wired. I remember even as a young kid, I think I was maybe 10 years old, and I had a paper route. Now, some of you don't even know what that is, right? But back in the day, they printed the news on big sheets of paper, folded it up, and kids like me delivered it to your house. Crazy, I know. But over the time, I had a couple different routes, and every route I had, I would time myself. And then every day, I would try and beat my best time. And it just made it more fun and made it more interesting. And that ultimately carried over into sports, into school, into business, and into life. So if we fast forward to today, everything we do at my company is designed to help our clients get more of what they want faster. We're all about having an impact. Our mission is to change lives. We're about making a difference. And that's my hope this morning with you, is that I can provide you with some insights, some process, some tools that can really help you and your team accelerate your success. And I'm going to show you a way that for some of you, you're going to be able to accomplish more in 12 weeks than most do in 12 months. Now, I realize that's a pretty outlandish claim, but we literally have thousands and thousands of people just like you doing that. So I'm honored and excited to spend the morning with you. I've got a foundational question that kind of sets the tone for the day. And so I want you to really think about this. I know it's early in the morning. You're still ramping up on the coffee, but I want you to really think about this question. Are you ready for it? Okay. 6 of you. That's good. All right, here we go. So here's the question. What are you capable of? I want you to really think about that. I know you're successful. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking a very different question. What are you capable of? Thomas Edison said if we did the things we're capable of, we'd literally astound ourselves. When was the last time you astounded yourself? In a good way, right? The thing you did at the bar the other night that almost went viral. That doesn't count in a good way. But think about that. What are you capable with your Proforma business? The impact you can have in your clients' lives, your staff, your community. How about your personal life, your health, your family, your legacy? And I think as you begin to really dig into that, it begs the next question, which is what does it take to live into that? What's it take to make that a reality? What's it take for you to be great, if you will, in the areas that matter to you? I love what Emerson said. Emerson said, nothing great has ever been accomplished without enthusiasm. Do you agree with that? Yes? Just not real enthusiastically, I see, right? I mean, think about that. It takes energy to create anything, doesn't it? But it's not the only thing. He didn't say it was the only thing, because if it were, honestly, all you'd have to do is get all jacked up on a bunch of Starbucks, and you'd be great. If you've ever been around anybody like that, they're not great. They're kind of scary. So it takes more than just energy. And it's interesting, because every week I'm in a different city or a different country, and I ask that question. What do you think it takes for you to be great in the areas that matter to you? And you know what? I get different answers. Some people say, you know, Brian, it's knowledge, it's intellect. And I think as important as that is, it's not the difference maker. Because we all know people that are really, really smart that aren't great. And then others will say, okay, then it's strategies and ideas. There again, I think those matter. They're not the difference maker, though. Because if they were, we could share a great idea with a room full of people, and everyone would leave here and become great. Now, when was the last time that happened? Can you say never? Doesn't guarantee anything, does it? And then still others will say, okay, then it's who you know, it's your network, or it's the resources you have available. Come on. You know people that are well-connected and well-liked that aren't great. So the question for me is, if it's not knowledge and intellect, it's not strategies and ideas, it's not who you know, right? What separates the great from all the rest? Here's the good news. Same today as it's always been. It'll be the same in the future. It'll be the same for the rest of our lifetimes. It's the same in a local economy, it is a global economy. Same in thriving markets or struggling markets. The other good news, it's simple. You're going to want to write this down. I think you have a handout there. What it takes to be great? Steroids. Just a little cream on your arm, shot in your booty. All kidding aside, non-chemically induced greatness, execution. Think about that. People say knowledge is power. I disagree. It's only powerful if what? Yeah, if you act on it. And great ideas, here's the rub. Great ideas are worthless unless they're implemented. Because the marketplace only rewards those ideas that get implemented. And it's the same in your personal life as it is your business. So I want to share with you a system that's designed to help you and your team accomplish what you're capable of, to really perform at your best day in and day out through more effective execution. And it has at its foundation an athletic training process called periodization. Now that's a weird term. Anyone familiar with that from athletics? Occasionally we'll get one or two. So periodization is an athletic training process that began in the 70s. Started in Eastern Europe with Olympic athletes, designed to create breakthrough performance. Works so well, in fact, that it's used in most sports today, whether you know it or not. So it was years ago, my business partner, Michael Lennington, and I saw that, and we said, you know what, that has applicability for what we're doing in our business and what we're doing with our clients. And at its core, periodization is a fundamental shift in the way we think and the way we act. So we're talking this morning about how to get results, how to get more of the results you want faster. The question I have for you is, what do you have to do to produce any kind of result? At the lowest level, most basic level, what's it take to produce a result? Say it nice and loud. Action, right? You agree with that? Yes or no? Yes. Great. So, and every time you take an action, does it produce a result? It does, doesn't it? Might not be what you want. In fact, oftentimes isn't what you want, but it always produces some sort of result. Physics tells us that. Every action has a reaction. Okay? So the next question then is, okay, why do you act the way you act? Why do you behave that way? And if you're like me, your wife asks you that all the time. Why do you do that? But there are a lot of things that influence the way we behave. What are some of those things? Just call them out. Your environment, thank you. What else? What's that? Thought process, great. What else? Personality, right. What else? How about your goals? Would that influence? Your desires, who you associate with, the culture you're in, right? Your training, your education, your upbringing, your imprinting. I mean, there's a lot of different things that impact that, but it all comes back to the notion of our thoughts. Our thinking drives our actions create our results. Ultimately, our thinking creates our results. And I've got a fun little exercise for you, so I need you to stand up, find a partner about your own size, and then I'll give you some instructions. Can I borrow you? Do you mind? Can I borrow you? Just stand up real quick, find a partner. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, you don't speak English? Okay, are all three of those, any of those speak English? Okay. Can I borrow you? Do you mind? What's your name?
Jody.
Jody, I won't embarrass you, I promise.
Okay.
Okay. So quickly find a partner about your own size. If you have more than one partner, kick someone out. If you do not have a partner, raise your hand, and you may have to move around. Okay, so everyone's got a partner? Great, so this is a game. You guys like games? Come on, we're in Vegas. You like games? The object behind the game is to what?
Win.
Yeah. Remember what Emerson said about enthusiasm. Okay, let's try that again. The object behind the game is to what?
Win.
There we go, like it. So the object of this game is to win, like most games, and the way you win this game is you score the most points. So I'm going to ask you to clasp up right hands with your partner. Jody's graciously volunteered to be my partner. Now, I score points when my right hand touches Jody's right shoulder without letting go, not my left, my right. Just relax. Oh. She's like, no way. These don't count, okay? She scores points when her right hand touches my right shoulder without letting go. The object of the game is to win. Hey, hang on, hear all the lessons. The object game is to win. The way you win is score the most points. The only other rule, though, is don't hurt yourself or your partner. You got 10 seconds, ready, go. Thank you, Jody. That's all I needed. Okay, stop. Great, have a seat, please. Don't like being touched that early in the morning? Never before noon? All right. Okay, show of hands. How many people scored 0 points? Nice and high, show of hands. Okay. How many did you guys score? You got 1 in? Okay, show of hands again, 0 points. Ladies, let me see what you guys did. Your name is? Rhonda and? Gela. Stand up, ladies. Show the group how you did it. Rhonda and Gela. Show off. Ready? Go. Go. They're going. There you go. Okay, they weren't smiling like that, though. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, some of you have played this before. Anybody not play this before and score 5 or more points? How many? 10 or more? 10 or more points? Over there? Okay, what are your names? Can't hear it. Kathy and Julie, stand up. Let's see how you ladies did it. More than 10 points, huh? Okay, ready? Go. There you go. Give them a round of applause. Very good, ladies. So the object of the game is to win. The way you win is score the most points. When I said go, some of you heard rumble. Right? Because the thinking says for me to win, someone has to lose. Yeah. The only way to win this game, though, is how? Working together. It's the only way to win it. I know some of you are thinking bullshit, but that is true. That's the only way to win the game. Score the most points, working together. Now, here's the thing about that. We've all heard win-win for decades. At one level, we get it. Another level, we don't operate that way. Now, this has very little to do with win-win, win-lose. It's just an opportunity for you to see how your thinking creates your results. And it's that way in every area of your life. In the big things and in the little things. How you go through your day, whether you go through your day with joy and creativity, or whether you go through it with stress and angst. So a recent study said the average person has 50,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. And I would offer every one of those to either take in a direction you want to go or away from it. I like to joke that occasionally a random one sneaks in. Like, why isn't phonetic spelled the way it sounds? Okay, so we got a few spellers back here. You can check in with them later. But here's the crazy thing. The study went on to say that on any given day, about 95% of your thoughts are repeats from yesterday. Think about that. How are you going to create a different result with the same thinking, going to drive the same action, going to what? Create the same result. Albert Einstein said it this way. He said, we can't solve today's problems with the same thinking we used to create them, yet that's how most people go through life. Periodization in the 12-week year is a fundamental shift in the way we think and the way we act. And what makes that so challenging is I think we're pretty conscious of our actions. We're pretty unconscious of our thinking. But that's what's creating the life you're living. That's what's going to create your future as well. So, we saw that. Michael and I kind of were thinking about that, and we came across this concept of periodization, and we married the two. And we said, you know what? We got to get out of that annual environment. Because what happened was, when we were working with clients, we did what probably most of you folks did. We helped our clients set annual goals and build annual plans and break them down quarterly and monthly and weekly, and we got good results, but we didn't get what they were capable of. And we realized that at the heart of that had to do with the thinking more than the actions, right? Because in January, right now, December's a long way off. Everybody starts out the year going to have their best year ever. It's rare when you run into somebody and they go, yeah, this year's going to suck. Not in January. But we're going to get to the end of the month, and you know what? Most people are going to be behind goal. They're going to be behind plan. But nobody's going to be worried. Why? The thinking says I got plenty of time. Right? I got 11 months to catch up. We're going to get to the end of the first quarter, and most people are going to be behind. Now, not happy with that, but I'm still not too worried. Why? 3 more quarters. And that mindset, that thinking permeates the year till somewhere late in the year, something changes. Why do we behave differently in November and December we do June and July? Running out of time, right? The deadline. Because there's this line in the sand, if you will. This point at which we're going to measure our success or failure. And for most people, that's the end of December. Now, at one level, that's an arbitrary deadline. But does it have an impact? You bet it does. In every industry, across the world. And so we saw that and we said, we got to get out of that. And that's where we took periodization and went beyond athletics to really have it work in a business and a personal setting. And we redefined a year. We said a year's no longer 12 months, it's 12 weeks. Now that may sound like semantics. You may say, okay, Brian, you're just calling a quarter a year. But if you really embrace 12 weeks as the year in your thinking, then everything changes. Everything changes. There's a sense of urgency in a 12-week year that doesn't exist in an annual cycle. And not the stressed out urgency you're feeling it late in the year, but just a healthy urgency day in and day out. And that's really critical because effective execution doesn't happen monthly and quarterly and semi-annually. It happens weekly, it happens daily. It really happens moment by moment. So what the 12-week year does, it takes that illusion of lots of time and blows it up. I mean, think about that. If you're going to have a great 12-week year, how many bad weeks do you think you can have? Not many. So you're immediately confronted with the fact that, look, if my goals matter, then this week matters, this day matters, right now matters. And what it does is it creates clarity and focus around the things that matter most with this healthy sense of urgency. And nothing magical in that, just more of the important stuff gets done day in, day out, week in, week out. Now, candidly, a couple days of that, no big deal. A couple weeks of that, no big deal. But day after day after day, week after week after week after week after week, and in 12 short weeks, you could be in a very, very different position. We do a lot of work with sales folks and businesses. The average increase is 15 to 30% in the first 12 weeks. We have thousands that have 100, 200, 300% increases. We helped a billion-dollar company double their sales in 6 months. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But it starts with getting out of that annual environment. 12 weeks as the year where there's a hard line in the sand. It changes everything because it changes your thinking, which drives different actions, which drives dramatically different results. All right, now there's more to the 12-week year than just how we think about time and how we think about the year. We bundled it with a set of principles and disciplines that really are the fundamentals of high performance. We didn't invent this stuff. We just packaged it so it's easier for you to apply. And as we go through this is kind of more than just a keynote, it's like a quasi-workshop. So we're going to roll up our sleeves. I'm going to do a little work with you on some of these things because these are the things that as you learn to leverage them, can make a huge difference in your business. Now, the word of caution, everything I'm going to talk about from this point forward, you've heard before. You know. But there's a big difference between knowing and doing. So my challenge to you and my encouragement to you is to think about how you can leverage these more effectively and how to apply them as a system. And we'll talk about that more as we go forward because that's where you'll see the greatest impact. All right, and because this is a little bit more of a workshop, if you have questions, raise your hand. I want to make sure that when you leave here, you have what you need to make this work for you. You don't have to worry, does the 12-week year work? We've worked in virtually every industry around the world, at every level. In fact, our latest claim is that we're intergalactical. There's a company that is working on the technology to go out to asteroids and mine them for precious metals, and they use the 12-week year to run it. So we get that going for us. So you don't have to worry, does it work? I want to make sure when you leave here, you know how to make it work for you. Fair enough? You up for that? You ready for a little work? Ready to roll up your sleeves? All right. Here we go. So there are 5 disciplines And we're going to go through these. Some of I'll do a little deeper dive on than I will some of the others, just because time's limited. But I'm going to start at the starting point. Whoa, what just happened? Hang on. That was crazy. Let's see where we're at here. There we go. So the cornerstone of how all high performance is vision. And I know the minute I say that, I can hear the wheels spinning. Some of you are saying, well, man, I've heard that before. Well, of course you have, because that's the starting point of all high performance. It really is the first place we engage our thinking about what's possible for us. It's the first place where we limit ourselves as well. Winston Churchill said the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. And partly what he was talking about is we create things twice, first mentally, then physically. And if you can't create it mentally, you'll never create it in the physical world. Roger Bannister, you remember that name? What's he famous for? 4-minute mile. First person in history to ever run a mile in 4 minutes or less. Up until that time, everyone said impossible. In fact, the medical community came out and said, as a species, we're not built to do that. And then one day, this freak of nature, Roger, breaks through. You know how long he held the record? I mean, it should still be standing, right? After all, it was impossible. Yeah, it was something like 27 days. Like 27 days, the next person breaks through, next person. Today, high schoolers. So even a physical event, the barrier is not physical, it's mental. And it's the same for you and I. If you're ever going to create anything great in your life, it's because you embraced it mentally first. And that's a challenge. Because when you really think about creating something great, creating something you haven't created before, kind of going out in an area that's really outside your comfort zone, it gets very uncomfortable. And there's this little voice in your head that kicks in. Have you noticed that? I mean, when you really think about doing something you've never done before, something wild and crazy in a big way, you notice that little voice that kicks in? And does that voice tend to be positive or negative? Negative, doesn't it? So what are some of the things you might hear? Don't do that. You might embarrass yourself. You might hurt yourself, right? Can't do it. Some version of impossible. Would you agree with that? Yes or no? Okay, you guys got to work with me. Come on. It's important that we acknowledge that, because if you haven't experienced that, we need to know who you are. We need to do a brain scan and see what's going on in there, because it's part of the human condition. And the reason I think it's important to understand that is because I think there's this tendency for us to look at other people that are doing stuff we haven't done before and go, they're fearless. No, they're not. They went through the same process, right? Everything starts out, if you really think about doing something great, that little voice kicks in your head and says some version of impossible. Not you, not now. And so what we tend to do is we tend to go, okay, yeah, and we leave it. And it might be months before we come back, it might be years. But if you're going to create it, you have to first create it mentally, which means you have to move from impossible to possible. And honestly, that's the biggest leap you'll ever take in creating anything great in your life. That's the most difficult step. Whether it's individually in your personal life, whether you're a solopreneur, whether it's with a team. And part of the reason is that there's this question we ask really early on in the process that sort of shuts the whole process down. So if I said to you in the next 12 weeks, we're going to double your income, and we're going to take you from 4 or 5 days a week to 1 day a week less, what would be one of the first questions you'd have for me? How? Logical question, right? How would you do that? The problem with that question at this phase is you don't know how. Because if you did, you'd be doing it. So the fact that you don't know how reinforces what? Possible or impossible? Impossible, doesn't it? And it sort of shuts the whole thing down. So let me give you a much better question. Suspend the question of how, the question of what if. So you know what, little voice? You're probably right. I probably can't do that. What if I could? What might be different for me, for my customers, for my company, for my community, for my family? And the first time you do that, it's going to be really uncomfortable. And the next time you do it, it's going to be really uncomfortable, just slightly less. And the more you try it on mentally, the more comfortable it's going to be. Until at some point, if you stay with it, you'll move from impossible to possible. Now you're off and running. Now the next step is to move from possible to probable. That's a different question. That's the how question. See, it's not that how's a bad question. The timing of it, though, makes all the difference in the world. You ask it too early, shuts the whole process down. Once you see it as possible, it's a productive question. How would I do that? What would I need to do differently? What different things might I need to do? And if we stay with it then and we start to execute on it, what can happen is we can move to a given. And that's a very powerful spot. Because that's where mentally I'm already standing in the end result. It's no longer a question of if, it's simply a question of how. And there's lots of great examples of that through history. Thomas Edison with electric light. You guys know the story. 9,000 failed experiments over years. But when he was asked, how do you fail 9,000 times, he had an interesting answer. He said, I didn't fail 9,000 times. I figured out 9,000 ways how not to invent electric light. For him, it was a given. But it didn't start there. He had to climb this continuum just like you and I. And I'm sure when he first thought of it, right, he probably thought, that's not possible. But he didn't hang on to the how. He hung on to the what if. What if I could? What would be different for my legacy as an inventor, as a scientist? What would be different for my family, for future generations? What would be different for the world? And I'm sure there were a lot of naysayers. You know, over those years, I'm sure there were a lot of people that came, you know, why are you spending your time, money on this? It's never going to happen. But it was too late. For him, it was a given. Same for you and I. Now, I don't know if you'll ever have the impact Edison had, but you might. And you won't know it unless you're willing to engage it. So one of my encouragements to you today is really think about a life that's bigger and bolder than what you're currently living. A life that you're truly capable of. Not a life where you settle, but a life where you're capable, where you're at your best day in and day out. So one of the things I'd like to do on the page there is when we work with our clients in full-day workshops, we do a lot of work on vision. We don't have that time here, but I'd like to get a little started. So what I'd like you to do is on that handout under vision, I'd like you to write 3-year vision. Put that there, underline it if you would. And then I'd like you to write your age 3 years from today. And then what I want you to do is I want you to think about what does a great life look like 3 years from today for you? And I'm not just talking business, because business is just part of your life. What does a great life look like? And what is really you living your capability? Not just looking at the current track you're on, but what if you were to get really outrageous with what you focus on and what you go after? Because I want to tap into that motivation. That's the why. That's the why you're willing to do what you do. That's why you're willing to get out of bed every day. That's why you look forward to Monday instead of dreading it. Is because there's this powerful, compelling why. There's this vision of the future that's bigger than the present. And I want to start to just capture a little bit of that for you. So what does a great life lived look like? Not good, God willing, you're going to be here. Let's make it great. And I'm going to give you about 90 seconds just to jot down some thoughts on that. And don't worry, you know, sometimes when we do this work, people are really worried that, geez, if there's one thing I don't want to screw up, it's my vision for my life. Well, don't worry about that. Just put down what's meaningful to you. Just think about what pops in your head, and don't judge it. Just put it down. If it's meaningful to you, write it down. 3 years from today, what do you want your life to look like? A great life lived. I'll give you 90 seconds just to get that started. 30 seconds left there. All right, grab those last couple thoughts. And let me have you stop. Now, I know this is nowhere near enough time. We're just scratching the surface, but I want to get this process started. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and share 1 or 2 items off of that. The things that are maybe the most outrageous, the things that maybe scare you a little bit as well as excite you, because I want you to connect with that. So go ahead, turn to your neighbor, share just 1 or 2 things off that vision list. All right, wrap that up. Bring that to a close if you would. Great, thank you. Lily Tomlin, the comedian late in life, said, "All my life I wanted to be somebody. Now I realized I should have been more specific." So that's not where you want to end up. And this is just starting the process. I'm going to, later in the presentation, I'll give you some access to some free resources that you can do more with vision. The key, though, is you stay connected to it. If you create a vision and you don't do much with it, there's some benefit to that. The real benefit, though, is you stay connected with it. And so I have a little reminder in my Outlook that says Connect with Vision. I have it laminated every day. Sometimes I'll read through the whole thing. Sometimes I'll just pick one piece of it and sort of mentally stand that ground. You know, what's different when I'm there? What does that enable me to do for my family? What does that do for my self-image? And the more you connect with it, the more real it is. Been some really great research recently on the brain, and some groundbreaking research that sort of changed the way scientists and researchers thought about how the brain operated. For years, they thought the brain stopped developing at a fairly young age. They realize now that's not true. Although I like to joke, I know a couple people that I think it is true, but for the vast majority of folks, it's not true. Your brain can continue to develop. You've probably heard the term neuroplasticity. Have you heard that? Luminosity's advertising that. What that is, it's your brain's ability to create new neural pathways. And so you can literally change the physiology of your brain by what you think about. Anyone been to London? Been in one of those black cabs? The little black cabbies? I think they still have to, but I know back in the day before GPS, they had to have the knowledge, which was they had to know every street and every address. And London's an old Roman town. It's not set up on a grid or a spoke. It's a mess. But when they do brain scans on those cabbies, there's a portion of the brain that's more highly developed. That's neuroplasticity. And so here's the cool thing. The research has also shown that the very neurons that fire when you think about a life of greatness are the same neurons that fire when you act on it. Did you catch that? Because that's really the power of vision. You can train yourself to act on it by thinking about it. So I don't know what your thinking was coming in here. You know, a lot of people we run into think this whole vision stuff is fluff. It's the cornerstone of you doing anything great in your life. And so I'm going to really encourage you to spend some time with it. Share it with the people that are going to encourage it. Share it with the people that are going to expand it. Share it with the people that are going to challenge it. Forget the naysayers. They're always out there. You know, don't share it with those folks, but share it with the people that are going to encourage it and engage with it. The more you engage with it, the more powerful it is. Right? So that ultimately, there's this connection between what I do Monday through Friday and the life I want to live. And the stronger that connection is, the easier it's going to be for you to step out and do things differently and do different things. Because I would offer, if you're going to create a different result, if you're going to take your business to the next level, you're going to have to do things differently and do different things. Amen? Give me a big southern amen. Amen? There we go. Can I get a witness? Do the altar call later. But seriously, my friend Lucas Serra is fond of saying, if you want something you don't currently have, you're going to have to do something you're not currently doing. Every time you do that, for you and your team, there's a level of uncertainty that comes with that. There's a level of discomfort. There's a level of anxiety. Without a compelling vision of the future that's bigger than the present, it's too easy to do what we've always done. That's how great performers become mediocre. That's how great businesses go out of business. Some names you might remember. Montgomery Wards. Anybody remember those guys? Penn Central, Bethlehem Steel, Gibson Greeting Cards, McCullough Change. I could keep going. Companies that were paragons in their industry that don't exist today. How does that happen? Well, it wasn't because everybody said, hey, we're not changing. It's because they kept doing what they'd always done. Meanwhile, the marketplace moved on. When I was a kid growing up, Sears, #1 retailer in the world. They had the formula. And they said, if it ain't broke, what? Don't fix it. And they dug in. Right? Meanwhile, the world kept changing. If you followed their story, they were bought out a few years back by Kmart. Ooh, big powerhouse. Now they're in bankruptcy. The question isn't whether or not you'll change. You're going to be left behind like Wards. You're going to get dragged along like Sears. You can get out in front of it. If you want to be out in front of it, you need a compelling vision. A vision that pulls you forward. And every member of your team. That's the power of vision. I love this quote. See if I can get this to work. There we go. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? That's all about vision. That's all about vision. All right, so that's the first discipline, vision. The second discipline, then once we know what we want, then we need to plan for it. Now, most people plan, few people implement. So I want to do a deeper dive on this with you. And I want to talk about how 12-week planning is different than traditional planning, and I want to help you start to develop your first 12-week plan. So let's start with how it's different than traditional planning. 3 things in particular. The first is that with 12-week planning, there's greater predictability. The further you plan in the future, the less certainty. I mean, you can't predict the future. If you could, you wouldn't be sitting here. And so that's why annual plans and beyond tend to be very numbers-based. They're more like budgets than they are plans. Because it's really difficult to know what we should be working on 9, 10 months from now. You don't know what's going to be happening in your marketplace. You don't know what's going to be happening with the economy. You don't even know what's going to be happening with your staff. Right? We bring that horizon near term to 12 weeks, though, the predictability goes up exponentially. And so you'll see 12-week plans are not only numbers-based, they're very activity-based, which is really critical. Because as we just said, if you're going to create a different result, you're going to have to do things differently and do different things. Those become the actions, or what we call tactics in the plan. Second thing that's different with 12-week planning is it's more focused. Most plans have too much in them. You start out the year overwhelmed, you go through your diffuse, you make a little bit of progress across this broad spectrum. That's a recipe for mediocrity. With the 12-week year, our approach is let's be great at a few things versus mediocre at many. And we can do that because we're not trying to plan for 12 months. Plan for 12 weeks. At the end of that, we're going to stop, and we're going to look at what worked, what didn't work. Where are assumptions on, where were they off? What's changed in the marketplace? We're going to reconnect with our vision, we're going to lock and load and go again. It's a much more dynamic process. You know, when planning first made its way into business some 90 years ago or more, I mean, you could look out 5, 6, 7 years, not a lot was going to change. It's not the environment we're in today, are we? And yet, most organizations, most individuals plan the way they did 90 years ago, where it's this one-time annual event. If you want to be at your best, that has to change. And then finally, third thing that's different with 12-week plans is they're structured for implementation. Structured for implementation. The only reason we plan is because it helps you implement. But how that plan is structured, how it's laid out, how it's written, impacts the implementability. Not even sure that's a word, but it's descriptive. So we have two levels. The first is with 12-week plans are the goals. And that's that longer term vision brought near term. Where do we need to be into 12 weeks to be standing that ground? Now, right out of the gate, it gets challenging. In that less is more. One goal is better than two, two's better than three. When you start to get three or more in any area, like your business, you're typically setting yourself up to struggle. Okay. Doesn't mean you can't have more than three, but when you do, you're typically, because you're spreading yourself too thin. It's all about focus. And the truth of the matter, what's in play here, is that we all have limited capacity. I mean, we work with companies that have 30, 50, 70,000 people. They still have limited capacity. You have limited time capacity. You have limited emotional capacity. You have limited physical capacity. And the more you spread that, the greater the likelihood that you don't accomplish anything great. The 12-week year is all about focus. And we can do that because we're not planning for 12 months. Plan for 12 weeks. At the end of that, we'll come back and we'll go through that process. And so I really want to challenge you to think about, are there one or two goals that would make the biggest difference in your business? If we listed everything we could do and you just picked the number one even, and you focused on that for the next 12 weeks and you nailed it, and then we did that again with the next 12 weeks and the next 12 weeks, it quickly can become life-changing. It's the difference between a floodlight and a laser beam. They're both light, but with a laser beam you can cut through steel. That's the power of focus. And so that's what we want to try and help you do, is really focus in your energies in a few key areas so that you really move the needle. And you'd be surprised how quick 12 weeks goes. All right, so each one of those goals then has a tactical plan. And this is where 12-week planning departs from traditional planning in a big way. In that, most plans are conceptual, they're not tactical. So what do I mean by that? Let's take in a sales environment. You might see things like referrals, cross-sell, focus on our top clients, things like that. Great concepts, but those don't execute. We need to get to where the statements in the plan describe an action that you or someone on your team takes. Ask for referrals 3 times a day. Do you see the difference? Get very, very granular. And this is where most people get tripped up. Because the plan's conceptual, it doesn't execute well. It doesn't measure well, it doesn't monitor well, so you don't know what's really working and what's not working. When you get tactical, there's some key benefits to that. The first is when you get tactical, you and everyone on your team will know what matters most for the next 12 weeks. It's what's in the plan. You'll also know the magnitude of the work, because when you plan conceptually, it masks the work. It looks like you've got this one item, and it may be 10 or 11 items to really get that done. And the third thing is, when we get tactical, and this is probably the biggest benefit, is it leaves a breadcrumb trail. So you'll know specifically what worked and what didn't work, which is really critical. Because every plan you ever write is flawed. It's good news. There is no perfect plan. So you need to know what's working and what's not working. And ultimately, how do you know if your plan's any good or not? You got to execute it, you got to measure it, right? So we're going to have to go out in the marketplace knowing that some of the stuff's going to work, some of it's not. Okay? That's the process. But we've got to get granular. We've got to get tactical. So I want to do a little work on this with you. Questions on 12-week planning at this point? Because I'm going to do a little deeper dive here with you. Okay. So I'm going to have you set a 12-week goal. And I want to talk about that a little bit. My question to you is, what do you have greater control over, the actions or the outcomes? The actions, right? We don't control the outcomes. We desire the outcomes. We influence the outcomes. We control the actions. I want you to understand that the goals are the outcomes. The tactics are the actions. Now, I run into some people that say, no, I was always taught never set a goal you can't control. That's bunk. That's what a goal is. It's an outcome. And so if we don't get that relationship right, the execution breaks down. So as we talk about building a plan starting with the goal, I want to be clear that it's an outcome. Make sense? Okay. And then there's some criteria for writing good goal statements. It's on the top, it's in your workbook at the top of page, I got to print these page numbers bigger, page 3. And there's 5 criteria there. You've probably heard SMART goals. This is kind of our version of that. But if I'm going to ask you to write a goal and start to build out a 12-week plan, we probably ought to just review these real quick. So what's the first one on the list there? Specific and measurable. Great. So if we're going to write a goal, it needs to be specific and measurable. Why is that important? So one, we can track and know if we're making progress. We can see if it's working or not. Good. What else? Accountability. Talk to me about that. Okay. So if we're specific with it, there's not a lot of wiggle room in there, is there? So it sort of creates this accountability to it that there's nowhere to hide, which is a good thing if we're serious about it. Good. Why else? Yeah, it's easier to execute. One of the keys is we have to be able to define where there is. If you can't define there, you can't build a plan for it. And in some cases, that'll be pretty easy. You quantify it. So if you have a sales goal, it's pretty easy. It's a number, isn't it? There's other goals you'll have that are difficult to quantify, so you have to qualify. What's different 12 weeks from today? We can't measure them by the actions. We have to know what the outcome is that we want. And you'll find this a lot as you set personal goals as well. So let me give you an example. Let's say I want to improve my marriage. I can't measure it by date night, because in my case, that could actually hurt my marriage. That's a joke, I hope. You can ask my wife later if that's a joke or not. But I can't measure by that. I need to know what is it I want different in my marriage so that I can tell, is date night going to help me create that or not? So if you can't quantify it, you have to qualify it. What's different 12 weeks from today? What's number 2? Great, thank you. So stated positively. And here we're not talking about flowery language, but words create focus, they create energy. So focus on the positive thing we want to make happen. The example I like to use is, rather than a 2% error rate as a goal, which I really don't want errors, do I? How would I restate that? 98% accuracy, 98% success. Yeah. Focus on the positive thing I want to make happen. Number 3. Thank you. Realistic stretch. This one's interesting because it's different for everyone. And so the rule of thumb we use is, if you can get there without doing anything different, it's not enough of a stretch. If, on the other hand, when you write it down, you break out in a cold sweat and the demons come out, it's probably a bit much. Okay? But keep in mind, especially at the goal level, you don't control the outcomes. So there's freedom to stretch there. And in fact, how much you stretch is really, to some degree, predicated on, are you willing to do the activity? Number 4. Accountability, yeah. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We're going to talk about that concept more a little bit later, but for now, don't put it in there unless you're willing to do it. Don't put it in there because somebody else thinks it's a good idea or you think it should be in there. If you're not willing to do it, don't put it in the plan. You've got to be willing to own it. And number 5, time bound. Great, so every 12-week plan, by default, the goal is bound by 12 weeks, but each tactic has a due date as well. So if you can pull that back up on the screen for me, you'll see that each one of these actions have a due date. Some of them come due one time, like in week 1 or week 5 or something. Others are recurring. Could I get the slide back up, please? Others are recurring. They might be due every week in the 12 weeks. So not only does the goal have a due date for the 12 weeks, but every action has a due date. So it drives the execution. And you'll see how that flows through to how we work daily and weekly as we go through this. Specific and measurable, stated positively, realistic stretch, accountability, time bound. All right, so let's have you set a goal. In the middle of the page there, let's use the date of, let me look at my calendar real quick. We're going to start it this past Monday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's go to, let's just go to March 29th. How's that? For the 12-week year ending March 29th, what do you want to focus on? Just because there's 3 dots there doesn't mean you need to set 3 goals. You might set 1 business goal and 1 personal goal. If this is your first 12-week year, that would be great because there's a learning curve here. But again, I want you to think about an outcome that will represent a great 12-week year for you and your business. And same thing in your personal life if you're going to set a personal goal there. Something you're really committed to. Not just something that you just hope happens, but you're willing to do some heavy lifting on. So let me give you a minute or two to kind of lock that in. What do you want to make happen in the next 12 weeks from an outcome standpoint? All right, so something to think about as you set a 12-week goal for the first time is there's often a tendency to take the annual goal and divide it by 4. Anyone do that? It's pretty common because everything you've done to this point has been annualized. But typically, that's limiting. So I got a call, this was a couple years ago, September 7th, I remember the date. Audra Barbeau called me, and she called me because she said, I just got off with the phone with my boss, and I hit my annual goal. Now, she was working with the 12-week year. And this was September 7th. And she said, it's likely that I'll double it before the end of the year, which she had done. She doubled her annual goal because she was working on 12-week goals. That wouldn't have happened had she taken the annual goal and divided it by 4. But because you've been annualized, you kind of got to do that because that helps you think through it. But also, don't just lock into that. Make that one data point. Think about what's the best 12 weeks you've ever done. Right? What's working in your favor right now? What tailwinds do you have? What headwinds do you have? And really lock into a number that represents a great 12-week year for you. Okay? So everyone have that? Anyone need more time with that? So I want to make sure it's an outcome and it meets the criteria. All right. Did anyone put working out as a goal? Anyone have a goal, personal goal of working out? Okay, a number of you, great. So question for you, what's the problem with this as a goal? If I stated my goal as working out 4 times a week, what's the problem with that as a goal? Okay, so it's broad, it's not specific. So if I said I'm going to work out for an hour with weights 4 times a week, what's the problem with that as a goal? Say it again. No outcome. It's really not an outcome, is it? It's an action. And I've yet to meet someone that their goal is to work out. It's always to lose weight, to get in shape, to lower blood pressure, something like that. And if we don't get that relationship right, if it's not tied to anything more aspirational, 2-3 weeks in, it becomes drudgery. Because it's not a goal, it's an action. And so if you have a goal to work out, scratch that as the goal. Figure out what the goal is. Why do you want to work out? What's the purpose of the working out? If it's to drop 15 pounds, that's the goal. If it's to lower blood pressure, that's the goal. And we got to get that relationship right or the execution breaks down. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So do me a favor, turn to the person next to you and just critique each other's goals. Make sure they're true outcomes and that they meet the criteria. Specific and measurable, stated positively, realistic stretch, time-bound, ownership of it. Cool. Good. Yeah. Begin to wrap that up, please. Okay, if I can get your attention back. So does everyone have at least one solid goal they can work with? Does anyone not have that? Okay, good, good. So if that's the what or the where, we need to figure out the how. That's the tactical portion of it. So once we're clear on what we want to create as an outcome, then we need to think through, okay, what's the best way to get there? And when I think of planning, it's really kind of problem solving. The problem is, how do we get from where we're at to where we want to be? And most of us tend to plan in a linear fashion, tend to problem solve in a linear fashion, kind of outline, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Nothing wrong with that, just that there's a predictable outcome when you do that. There's another method to kind of think through it that'll create a lot more output. And I think that's helpful for you then to be able to kind of select what you want to focus on. Because just like at the goal level where less is more, it's the same at the tactic level. What we're really looking for at the tactic level is not everything you can think of in the plan. We're looking for the critical few. The least number of tactics to accomplish the goal. I get asked that all the time, what's the right number of tactics? And the answer is the least number to accomplish the goal. Not the least number, every goal would have one tactic. The least number to accomplish the goal. It might be 6, it might be 16, it might be 60. But the least number, because what we want to do is we want to sort through all the things we could do and figure out the activities that will have the greatest impact. And so I think it's really helpful to first kind of think through what are all the things we could do before we start to sort through that. And so there's a process called mind mapping. How many are familiar with mind mapping? Okay, so a few of you, great. For the rest of you, this is an added bonus. This is a great way, that says mind mapping. This is a great way to kind of think through all the things you could do, and then I'll show you how we sort them, okay? And if you have any staff or any team at all, this is a really powerful exercise because it gives everybody a chance to get involved. And so what we do is we take the goal and put it in the middle. So I'm gonna do that weight loss goal. I'm gonna say I want to weigh 185 pounds and 10% body fat, okay? That's the goal. Your goal might be different. I'm just using that as an example. And then what we do is we brainstorm all the things we could do that would help us lose weight. So I'm going to do this with you. And so it's really hard to hear you up here, so you got to call it out. Call it out nice and loud, and I'll add it to the chart, and we'll just see what we come up with, okay? So what's one thing I could do to lose weight? So work out. What else? Okay, limit calories. I also heard change how you eat, so maybe the food I'm eating, that kind of thing. Change eating. Good. What else? What'd she say? Less alcohol? Are you serious? We're just brainstorming, right? We're not committing yet. We're just brainstorming. Okay, so I could join a gym. I could hire a trainer. What else? Walk where I can. Somebody, I think I heard sleep, rest, that's really important. Okay, so a buddy or a partner. Okay, so maybe Weight Watchers, a program like that. Good. Ooh, a race or a competition, right? That's cool. What else? Is it? What was the other one? I couldn't hear it. Oh, okay. So an app to track. Okay. So no food after 8, something like that. Kind of the buddy system, a friend. More H2O. Great. So make it public. Track it. What else? Okay. So journal. Water right there. What was the other one? So social media group. All right. Surgery. Let's cut all this crap out. What else? Oh, eat out less, yeah. So hire a nutritionist, the workout partner, we got the buddy partner there. Okay, so no soda. Okay, so weigh in. How about this one? I could buy smaller clothes. So there's more, but you get the idea. You see what happens? There's this first wave, and you wait, there's more, and you wait, there's more, and you wait, there's more. And sometimes in the latter, there's some real gold. Now, we're not going to try and do all of this. I'll show you how we sort this in a minute, but I think it's really helpful to look at all of it and think about which ones will have the greatest impact. Okay? So here's what I'd like you to do. On the bottom half of that page, I want you to mind map one of your goals. And get someone at the table involved with you, because it's always better if there's more than one brain. And listen, don't just list it, draw the circles, because it taps a different portion of your brain so you get different output. And just stay with it. Sit with it, let it percolate, and see what comes of it. Okay, so let me give you a couple minutes to just take one of the goals, and someone at your table help you mind map that, and then you can mind map theirs as well. Questions on what I'm asking? Okay. Give you a couple more minutes there. All right, you got it? Anyone need more time? Okay, so let me get your attention back. By the way, again, this is a fabulous exercise, especially if you have a team, because it allows them to create input. Every 13 weeks we go off-site, we take our leadership team, we mind map every goal we have. And we take a picture of it, because we're not going to implement all that. And some of the stuff we implement works, some of it doesn't, so we may come back to it even in the 12 weeks. But in this situation, if I try and do all of this, I'm probably setting myself up for failure. So I need to sort this. I need to really figure out the critical few. And so the way I do that is a simple question. I ask myself, if there were only one thing on this list that I could do in the next 12 weeks, which one would have the greatest impact on me hitting that goal? You might choose surgery. I'm going to go a different direction. There's a number of things here about eating. I'm going to select that because it's really difficult to out-train a bad diet. But again, it doesn't matter what you select. You select, if there was only one thing you could do, which would have the greatest impact? And then ask the next question. If there was only one more thing that I could do, what would have the greatest impact on me hitting that goal? And there's this kind of this workout stuff too, you know, with a trainer in a gym and that kind of thing. So I'm going to take that. And then I'm going to stop and say, if I do those two things, will I hit the goal? If the answer is yes, I don't need anything more. But remember, these are concepts. So each one of these concepts has a set of tactics with them. Might be 3 tactics, it might be 12. I don't know yet. But if I can't answer yes to that, then I need to pick a third. And I keep that process going until I feel like the things I've circled will deliver on the goal. Once I'm there, that's my critical few. But remember, these are concepts. So every time you pick one of these, you're not picking one item. There's a lot of work in each one of these. Questions on that? So go back to your mind map, and I'd like you to identify your critical few. If there was only one thing you could work on in the next 12 weeks, what would have the greatest impact on you hitting that goal? If there's only one more thing, what would that be? And is that enough, or do you have to pick 3 or 4 of those? Whatever number you have to pick is the right number. But I want you to think through it. And just circle the ones for you that are your critical few. All right, everyone got it? So now we need to turn this into a tactical plan. So turn to page 4, and at the top I'm going to define what a tactic is for you because it matters. So write this down, please. It has 3 elements. A tactic is a sentence. So it's not a fragment, it's not a thought, it's a sentence. And I'll talk about why we write tactics this way in a minute, but just jot this down for me. First element is a sentence. It typically starts with a verb. So it's fronted with an action word. Sentence starts with a verb. And then the third aspect is it describes an action that you or someone on your team can take. So a tactic is a sentence, starts with a verb, describes an action that you can take. And again, the reason we write them this way is because it's going to define what matters most, it's going to show the magnitude of the work, and it's going to leave a breadcrumb trail. So if we go back to my mind map, change eating is not a tactic, trainer is not a tactic, gym is not a tactic, less alcohol is not a tactic, walking, sleeping, surgery, not tactics, they're concepts. So I took the 2 things I circled and turned them into a tactical plan. So the first thing had to do with eating. So I created some tactics. Now this is just an example. You might create totally different actions, okay? But first one was download the Weight Watchers app because I'm going to track my food intake. That's a one-time tactic, probably done in week 1. It's done. Tactic 2, enter daily food intake into Weight Watchers app. So that's an ongoing tactic because I'm going to do that every day for 12 weeks. You guys know anything about superfoods? Trying to lose weight, be healthy. So number 3 is order superfoods, wheatgrass, oil, spirulina. Tactic 4, take superfoods daily. Tactic 5, drink 8 glasses of water 8 times a day. Now again, you may have different tactics or you may have more. That's fine. But that's what I put together for the eating portion of that. Then I took the next thing I circled, which was working out, and came up with a set of tactics there. And notice I don't start renumbering. I just pick up, this was tactic 5, the water. Tactic 6 is enroll Tim and Russell as workout partners. 7, train with weights 3 times per week. 8, do cardio 2 times per week, minimum 20 minutes. 9, weigh in on Monday, 7 a.m. Now, if I've never worked out, I got to join a gym, I got to get a trainer. There's other tactics involved. But because I've worked out, I know what I'm doing. Again, your tactics may differ. Now, what ends up happening is these headers go away. So I have a goal and a set of tactics. Some relate to the first thing I circled, some relate to the second thing. If I had a third thing circled, some would relate to the third thing. So in the end, I have a very simple structure: goal, actions. If it's a team plan, meaning we're planning as a team, the execution's shared, some of these tactics would have my name on them. In our company, that's how we do it. Some of them have Judy's name, some have Michael's, some have Karen's. Right? We're going to assign the tactics as well. But you get the idea. I take those concepts I've circled, and I turn them into statements that describe an action that I can take. Very granular. Now, when we start to plan this way, it gets uncomfortable. And it comes back to what someone over here said about accountability, is that it sort of wrings out any wiggle room. In a plan like this, there's nowhere to hide, which is a good thing if you're serious about your goal. And what you'll see here in a few minutes is we don't have to be perfect with the execution, which is good because you won't be. We just need to be more consistent with it. But it starts with getting very granular in the plan. Most plans are too conceptual, and you pay a price for that. Getting tactical is more work in creating the plan. It pays big dividends on the execution. Okay. Questions on that? This is a really important piece because if the plan's not structured well, then the likelihood of you executing it drops off tremendously. Okay, so let's do this. On the bottom half of that page, go ahead and take the goal you mind mapped and take this critical few you selected and start turning those into tactics. Sentence starts with a verb, describes an action that you can take so that you end up with something similar to this. Let me give you a few minutes to do that. Give you another minute or two there. You may not get through all of them. I just want you to get a feel for it. So when you leave here, you can finish it. Okay, wrap that up if you would. That's probably not enough time for you to get the whole plan done, but you get a sense of how it's structured. Questions on 12-week planning at all? Questions? Any questions? Goals, tactics? Making sense? Okay. So if you have a team at all, how many of you have teams? Have one staff or more? Show of hands real quick. Okay, great. So one of the things that's required in an organization to perform at a high level for you and for your team is there have to be 3 structures in place. Doesn't matter what you embrace as values, whether you're innovation, whether it's collaboration, whether it's customer service. There are 3 structures that are required, and the first is clarity of expectation, clarity of vision, clarity of goals, and most importantly, clarity of daily and weekly expectation. That's why we've got to get tactical, especially with a team. It's important for you as an individual. If you're serious about your goals, it really matters as a team as well, because it spells out for the team the clarity of expectation. The other pieces are transparency and evidence, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. All right, so we've got this vision now, compelling vision of the future. We've got a 12-week goal and tactical plan. That's not enough. It's not enough to have a vision and a plan. I love what Mike Tyson, the boxer, said. He said, everyone has a plan till they get hit in the mouth. That's my best Mike Tyson. That's where process control comes in. And process control is just our term for tools and events that help you work the plan even when you don't feel like it. So a little cartoon for you. It's an executive in his high rise. It says, no Thursdays out. How about never? Is never good for you? If you're in sales and you're on the other end of that phone, you just got hit in the mouth. What matters is what happens when you hang up. And that's where process control comes in. So process control is the idea that rather than just relying on discipline, what we want to do is we want to insert some things into the environment. Because I don't know if you notice, some days you're more disciplined than others. And if you have teams, certainly some people are more disciplined than others. So what we want to do is not have to rely on that. And the analogy for me is, we're a big sports family. I have two girls, and they do basketball and volleyball and equestrian, and we love watching the Olympics. And they're coming up again this summer. And I remember watching the last Summer Olympics with Ledecky and Phelps. And here's the thing, I can promise you that in the 4 years leading up to that, there were times when they didn't feel like training, didn't feel like getting in the pool, but they did. And they did to a large extent because they had processes around them that made it easier for them to get in the pool than not get in the pool. That's what you need. That's process control. So I want to talk about a couple elements of process control. They're simple, yet they're really powerful. And the first is what we call the weekly plan. So if you've been tracking with this, we start with this longer term vision. We bring it near term. We set 12-week goals. We build out a 12-week tactical plan. Each week, though, there's a weekly plan. And the weekly plan doesn't contain everything you do in your job. It doesn't even have everything in the 12-week plan. It's just what's due in the 12-week plan this particular week. So in a sense, it's like a 1/12 slice of the 12-week plan. But by default, it captures what matters most. So this isn't something you sit down Monday morning and pull out a blank sheet of paper and create. In fact, you're looking at screenshots from a software program we have that takes that 12-week plan and automatically creates your weekly plan. But all it's doing is taking what's due this particular week and putting it in a weekly plan. If you're on a team, it does that for every member of the team. So again, it doesn't contain everything, but by default, it's the most important stuff because you said these are the actions that are most important to hitting the goal. And so what's powerful about this tool is everything else is secondary. So when you operate from a weekly plan that's driven from a 12-week plan, it lowers the stress. Because now you know how you win the week. It's executing this plan. And so print it out, calendarize it. You know, what day are you going to do that tactic 1? What day are you going to do tactic 2? And that's what guides your week. That's what guides your day. So I have mine in a Player Classic folder. I have my 12-week plan on one side. I've got my weekly plan on the other. When 20 minutes opens up on my calendar, I don't go check my voicemail. I don't go check my email. I don't go to my to-do list. I go to my weekly plan. Because I know if I get that stuff done, I had a great week. If I get all the other stuff done and this stuff doesn't get done, then all bets are off. It's a really powerful tool. Really powerful because it defines how you win the week. And again, you're not creating it from scratch. So the real planning of it is just working it into your calendar. You start on Monday, you pull this thing from what's due in the 12-week plan, and then you calendarize it. So you build your week around this stuff. You start with this and let the rest of the week build in. You with me? So everyone on the team has it. So not only do you know what matters most for you, you know what matters most weekly for everyone on the team. Clarity of expectation. Really powerful. I'm a college football fan, happen to be a Spartan. Anyone from the Spartan Nation? Go green. There we go. All right. So our good friend coaches, he's the offensive coordinator. It was his first year, which was a really rough year. But, you know, if your team's any good, they start the season with a goal to win their division, maybe play for the national championship. And that's their 12-week plan in a sense. But every game day, they have a plan just for that game. And they're not thinking about next week. Why? What would happen? They lose focus. They don't perform well. Same thing here. You don't have to worry about next week. 12-week plan will tell you what's due next week. This is how you win the week. And if you win enough of these weeks in 12 weeks, you'll be where you want to be. Really powerful. Really powerful. The second element of process control is what we call peer support. And study after study has shown that if you're going alone, you're stacking the odds against yourself. In fact, there was one fascinating study done with heart patients, people that had bypass surgery. And they focused on this because very expensive surgery, pretty painful as well from what I understand, and high relapse. So people will go through this and in a year or two they're back. And so now imagine you've just been unzipped and they stuffed some stuff in or took some stuff out and then they put you back together. And your doctor says, listen, if you don't change your lifestyle, you don't change the way you're eating, you don't change the way you're exercising, in 2 or 3 years you won't be here. That seems like a pretty big impetus to change, doesn't it? You either change or you're toast. So what do you think most people did? They changed initially. Everybody changed initially. When they went back and resurveyed them a year later, though, 90% of them had reverted back to their old lifestyle habits in literally a life or death situation. Now, so one of the things they did, though, is they started to put people in peer groups for 15, 20 minutes a week just to talk about how they were doing. And when they did that, with that group, they had a nearly 80% success rate. 10% without it, 80% with it. 7 times greater with peer support. Same thing in business. If you're going it alone, you're stacking the odds against yourself. So, with the 12-week year, we call that a weekly accountability meeting, where you get together with a couple peers and you talk about how you're doing. Now, if you're in a team environment, you meet as a team, but you're a peer. So that's how we do it. We have a team plan. Monday morning, we go through a WHAM. I don't facilitate that meeting. I'm just a peer in it. And what we talk about are the successes from last week. How did we do against our goals? And we put that on the big board. And then we looked at the plan and we said, okay, what got done in the plan this past week? What was due? What got done? And then from a team standpoint, we go around the room and everyone talks about how they executed. If you're a solopreneur, then what you want to do is you want to WHAM with a couple other solopreneurs. You need some other people that you're willing to be candid with. And no, we're not holding each other accountable. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We're holding each other capable, which means we're confronting the truth, we're challenging one another, we're encouraging one another. We're just keeping it real. And the impact we've seen is not that different than what they found in the heart study. If you're willing to do that week in and week out, you'll perform better. You'll stay in the game when the game gets difficult. And if you're going to take new ground, if you're going to create new results, it's going to get difficult. It's going to get uncomfortable. So I was talking to a few folks yesterday. I know a couple folks have been using the WHAM concept. Show of hands, real quick. Okay, great. So if you're interested, if you're a solopreneur, right, if you're on your own, or if you're in this room and you want to WHAM with somebody, on the table there's some cards. Just fill out your name, the name of the business, your email, and your phone. And what will happen is Greg's team will put the list together, and then you can contact people on the list. So what you're giving them permission to do is publish your name with other people that filled out the card as well. And you can go through there and you can look at, okay, who would I like to WHAM with? Now, an ideal number is probably 3. You can do the buddy system, but if someone doesn't show, then you're WHAMing by yourself, which gets a little weird, okay? How'd you do? Pretty good, awesome. So 3 seems to be the good number. And by the way, this WHAM is 15 minutes. It's not a big strategy session. It's not a problem-solving session. It's designed to create accountability to self and transparency with a couple other folks, okay? But it's a game changer. And I really want to encourage you to get involved. If you're not in a WHAM currently, get involved. And I know your thinking is, you didn't come here going, gosh, I hope this Brian guy creates another meaningless meeting for me. I don't have enough of those, right? But this is a game changer. It's 15 minutes once a week. It's typically on Monday. Monday morning's the best time. You can do it face-to-face. You can do it over the phone. Our team is geographically dispersed, so we have some people in the office. We have other people on Zoom with us. But when you do it Monday morning, it also acts as a trigger event. It triggers other activity. It triggers the assessment of last week, and it triggers the polling of this week's plan. So Monday morning's the ideal time. But really want to encourage you to try it out. Fill out the form. The list will go out. Pick your WHAM buddies. Schedule the time. Schedule the call. And then work with it. Work with it. And I think what you're going to find is that you're going to stay more encouraged. You're going to stay in the game, and you're going to accomplish more faster. Right? It's just like the heart patients. Don't stack the odds against yourself. Why make it harder? It's not sweeter if you get there on your own. It's longer. It takes years longer is all you're doing. So take a minute, fill that out, be sure and turn it in, and then you'll get access to other folks that are interested in this room and really want to encourage you to work with that concept. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so just leave the form at the table completed, and they'll grab them after the event. Anybody need one that didn't get one? Okay. Great, that's process control. So we've got vision, planning, process control. The next discipline is scorekeeping. Measurement drives the process. It's really the anchor of reality. It's where we go out to the physical universe and get feedback on our actions. And it's interesting because I see a lot of people shy away from measurement. And people talk about it in different ways, but there seems to be quite a bit of head trash around measurement. And so I want to talk about the value of it to start with. Okay? And I want to take you back to your freshman psychology days, to Maslow. Remember Maslow and his hierarchy of needs? Anybody remember that? And he created this. He was the first industrial psychologist to study motivation. And he came up with this hierarchy. And it started with basic existence, like food and shelter. Safety was the next level. Belonging. What was the fourth level? Self-esteem, and then self-actualization was the top level. And he said that the primary motivator would be whatever need was most predominant, provided the lower level needs were met. So if I didn't have food and shelter, I could care less about being on a team, right? But if that was taken care of, then it sort of moved up the ladder. Another guy by the name of Frederick Herzberg came along about 10 years later, another industrial psychologist, and he looked at that and he said, you know what, that's useful in a clinical setting. I don't know how to use it in a work environment. And what he was really after is what motivates people in a work environment. And so he did over 2,000 studies and narrowed the list of the top 2 things that motivate people in the workplace. What do you think they are? No, money was like 5th or 6th on the list. Recognition, great. So recognition was number 2. Purpose was not, interestingly enough. Yeah, what do you have to do to get recognized? Achieve, right? So number 1 was achievement, number 2 was recognition. So if you have a team, think about that. The simple on the other side of complex is set them up to achieve, recognize them when you do. But what's interesting about this is I would argue in order to know if you're achieving, you have to measure. And yet right now that's kind of countercultural. There's this movement to have everybody feel good and have high self-esteem, which I think is great. But one of the things they've been experimenting with younger children is taking measurement out. So I don't know if you've seen this, and maybe it's happened in your neighborhood, but in some of the schools, there's no tests, there's no scores, there's no grades. In an effort to build children's self-esteem. And there was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal a number of years ago that compared that type of instruction with direct instruction. And direct instruction is probably the way most of us were schooled, where there's tests, there's scores, there's grades. And they found that those kids schooled in direct instruction did better academically. Surprise! Right? What did surprise them, though, is those kids schooled in direct instruction, where there were scores and grades, had higher self-esteem. The other system without measurement was designed to build self-esteem. The kids we were scoring had higher self-esteem. How do you explain that? It goes back to what Herzberg found. The intrinsic motivator is achievement. How do you know that unless you're measuring? Right? And yet we tend to shy away from it. I remember I was on a Little League baseball team and we were horrible. We were absolutely horrible. And we started tracking on our own, could we go, another inning before they mercy ruled us? The coach wasn't tracking that, but we were. And it's interesting because some of the young soccer leagues in our town, they don't keep score. But at the end of the game, every kid knows the score, right? So I'd offer that measurement really builds self-esteem. That's what the research shows. And yet there's a lot of head trash around what measurement is and what it isn't. I got a video for you. I think you'll like this. Check this out.
We just moved. I called UPS to ask them to help out with
Can you
some
crank
boxes.
that?
Now, they're a good service, but you have to have information ready about your boxes before you even call them. I had no idea. I called them up. Yeah, I have 10 boxes if you come pick them up. We need to know the weight and the girth. Okay, goodbye. So I called back, we need the weight and the girth. Okay, I don't know what the weight is, and I don't know what girth means. So now what's the procedure? So this guy talks to me like I'm 4 years old. Well, do you have a bathroom scale? Yeah, but if I put the box on a scale, it's gonna cover up the numbers! What do I take them off really quick? 0, I'm not fast enough. What's he talking about? So this is true. I figured I would call back and just make up some numbers, you know. Let them come out and pick them up. If it's wrong, I'll pay the difference. Just dispatch the truck. Please. So I called back. Yeah, I have 10 boxes and... No, I'm another guy. Yeah, and they all weigh exactly 22 pounds, and they all have a girth of 3. 3 what? 3 girth units. Come pick them up, please. I'm begging you. They're boxes and they're brown and they have tape all on them. And they probably fit on a dolly.
That's Brian Regan. Love that guy. Here's the good news. You do not need to know what a girth unit is. Okay? But lead and lag indicators, you familiar with those terms? Yes, no, kind of? Lag indicators are the end result. So if we have a goal of sales, sales is a lag indicator. If I'm trying to lose weight, pounds lost is a lag indicator. And they call it lag just because there's this time lag between when I declare it and start to work on it and when it comes to fruition. Lead indicators are a measure that there's a strong correlation between that measure and the end result, but it happens earlier in the process. So a great example of that is opt-ins on online marketing. So, you know, if you ever signed up, exchanged your name and email for something, that's an opt-in. And every good marketer knows opt-ins to sale. Might be 10 to 1, might be 100 to 1, might be 1,000 to 1. But they can predict sales a lot earlier in the cycle based on that lead indicator, that opt-in. So that's a lead indicator. And we don't get too hung up on, is it lead or is it lag? We just call them key measures. Some people call them KPIs. And again, we look for the critical few. What are the handful of measures that are important for you to look at and track over the next 12 weeks to help you make intelligent business decisions? And some of that information is useful right in the moment, some only as you look at trends over time. But you have to have the courage to track it. Now, there's one lead indicator that's the most powerful lead indicator you have, and you're probably not even aware of it. And that ultimately is a measure of your execution. The most powerful lead indicator you have is a measure of your execution. Why is that? Because we control the actions, not the outcomes. So with the 12-week year, what happens is every week, there's a weekly scorecard created. That weekly plan turns to a scorecard. You check off what got done. It calculates a score between 0 and 100%. So you'll know as the CEO of your world how well you're doing. Whether you're in the 90% or the 30th percentile or wherever you're at. And you'll know why. And that's really critical. Because if there's a breakdown, if you're not getting the result you want, the breakdown's in one of two areas. It can't be anywhere else. It's either in the planned content, right? You don't have the right tactics, or it's in the execution. You're just not doing it. Where do you think it is the majority of the time? The execution. 80+% of the time. But what do most people do when the plan's not producing? Change the plan. Why is that? Because it's easier, right? And in fairness, you don't have a way to pinpoint the breakdown. With the 12-week year, you'll know where the breakdown is. Now, I mentioned earlier, you don't have to be perfect. What we've seen is with tens of thousands of people having used the system, if you average around 80+%, in most cases, you'll accomplish the goals. Not about being perfect. There's a difference between excellence and perfection. But 80 this week, and 80 again next week, and 80 again next week, and 80 again next week, and it's amazing. Now, the average person probably scores 65%. Academia, that's loser. On the system, though, you'll do well. You won't do what you're capable of, but you'll do well. So you have to decouple what you learned in school about that score. Because we've had a technology company that averaged 50% over the 12 weeks they hit their goal. Their conversation was about, what if we had averaged 85 or 80? right? So it doesn't mean you won't hit the goal, just the probability of you hitting the goal goes down. But it's having the courage to score it. So we track the lead and lags, we score the execution, which is really powerful. So as part of that WHAM, you talk about how you scored last week. I got an 87%. I got a 46%. Everyone in the group will know what that means, whether you had a good week or you had a struggling week. And again, it's not about being perfect, just being about honest and looking at, am I doing what I said I needed to do in order to accomplish what I said matters to me? And so it looks kind of like this. This is you living your vision. We bring that near term, you create this 12-week plan, this tactical plan that's very focused. That translates to a weekly plan with just the stuff this week. If you're on a team, it does so for everyone. That translates to a scorecard with a certain percent done. Right? So we have clarity, we also have transparency, and we have evidence because we're tracking the lead and the lags. And in the end, you don't have to do this stuff. You only have to do this stuff if you want to live this life. The other option is you can settle for less in life. That dream vacation, forget it. You're not willing to do what it takes. That 67 GTO, sweet, right? Forget it. Right? Or whatever else is part of your vision. You have one or two choices. You either step up or you settle for less in life. And most people never confront that. The 12-week year will confront that. It'll be very uncomfortable when it does, but you'll make the right choice. So I really want to encourage you, if you don't have a software, you can do it on paper, but put the pencil to it. Don't just guess at it. Really do the math and look at how well did you execute last week? How well did you do the things you said mattered most? Okay? And 12-week year is a guilt-free zone. We never beat ourselves up for anything we did last week because we can't change it, but we can learn from it. So if I'm not happy with it, what's going to be different this week? And that's part of that WHAM conversation. So I mentioned we WHAM as a team. If I show up in a week and I haven't scored well, the team says, what's going to be different this week, Brian? What got in the way? What are you going to do different this week? What did you do that wasn't in the plan? Why did you do that stuff instead of what was in the plan? Because if you're going to create anything worthwhile, it takes effort. Would you agree with that? Yes? Right? There's heavy lifting. And the heavy lifting for us in the business you're in isn't physical. It's emotional. It's entering into the activities that you haven't done before and getting your team to do the same and do them consistently until you build your confidence and you build your competence. That's the heavy lifting. If you're not willing to do that, you can't hit the goal. And that's why vision matters. That's the why. That's the why behind that. But we want to put that front and center every week for you, where you're assessing, did I do the things I said I needed to do, and how do I dial that in a little bit more this week, and dial it in a little bit more next week, and dial it in a little bit more next week. That honestly is how our clients accomplish more in 12 weeks than most do in 12 months. It's not about taking everything you do in 12 months and trying to cram it into 12 weeks. It's about being focused and consistent with the things that really matter. And one more of those done this week, and one more done the next 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 week. And in 12 short weeks, you can be in a very, very different position. Okay? So again, you don't have to use the software. You can do it on a legal pad. It doesn't matter, but it's the notion of tracking the lead and lags, scoring the execution. Questions on that? Got it? Okay. Yes. One of the members of the team. Yep, we spread it around. Every 12 weeks it's somebody else, but it's not me. Because if it's me, it becomes a report out to me. Yeah, and as a team, that's not what we want. We want kind of that peer-to-peer. So again, if I come in with a low score, people call me out, hey, what happened? And there's weeks I come in with a low score. It happens, right? Everybody stumbles, so good question. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we WHAM as a team. Yeah. Yep. Does that help? Great, good question. Any other questions? Back there? Did anybody hear that? Oh, we have our proprietary software. It's called Achieve. I think on the back page there's some resources there. There's Achieve for individuals, and there's Team Achieve, and we do all kinds of things from one-on-one coaching. And so, if you have some questions about that, reach out to us. We're here to help. Lots of different resources. And I'm going to share the one with you in just a minute here. Any other questions around what we're talking about? Yes, sir. So what does our WHAM meeting look like? So 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. So I was on it today at 6 because of the time change. We're Eastern. Right now, Michael's facilitating it. We start with the successes from last week. We talk about the goals, but any other successes. We may have smaller successes, so we're always starting with what's working. And then we'll go through the plan itself. Because it's a team plan, we go through what was due each week, last week, for the goals that we have. And then we go around the table, and each one of us reports out on a personal execution. So how well did I execute? How well did they? So pretty quick, pretty straightforward agenda. And then anything we look at this week's plan, each person has their weekly plan for this week. Talk about, is there anything going to get in the way of us executing this week? That's pretty much it. Yeah, and so if someone's struggled to execute, we press in. We never use it to embarrass anyone, though, but we're pressing in about, okay, what happened? What's going to be different? What are you committed to this week? So really just a candid conversation about our results and our execution. Does that help? Really simple agenda. And we probably go 15, 20 minutes max. Okay. All right, there's a fifth discipline that I want to share with you, and that is time use. Everything happens in the context of time. And Benjamin Franklin said, if you take care of the minutes, the years take care of themselves. And I think that's really great advice. One of the things I found, though, is there's all these things that crowd out my minutes. And there was a time when I thought, someday I'm going to be able to sweep that all away. And then I realized that's never going to happen. And that's not what it takes to be effective with your time anyways. It's not trying to eliminate all that minutia and all the stuff that interrupts. It's about carving out time for what matters most and then letting the rest of the day fill in around it. So we use a system called Performance Time, which uses time blocking to take back control of your day. There's no better system. If there were, we'd be training it. Now, ironically, I don't have a lot of time to get into that today, so here's where the resources come. So you can go to 12weekyear.com/getting-started, or you can text START to 9033-COMMIT, which the number's there, and you'll get 3 emails from me. The first will be about the vision. It'll give you some more exercises and some more information on how to create that vision and how to build a 12-week tactical plan. So you'll see some sample plans in there. 3 days later, you'll get a second email from me that'll be about process control and scorekeeping. And then 3 days post that, you'll get the third email, which is about performance time, about how to use time blocking to carve out time strategically, how to use time blocking to take care of all the emails and voicemails and the things that can eat up your day, and how to use time blocking to stay fresh and to stay rejuvenated. Okay, again, there's no better system, but what I'll warn you is as you start to use your time differently, you really bump up against the pain of change because you are very vested in how you use your time, which is typically why you can have such an impact when you start to use it differently. Okay. But those are the 5 disciplines. And what I'd like you to notice is how interconnected they are. I love sometimes you come to the big conference and the true motivational speaker comes out and he or she says, hey, it's this one thing, get you all fired up, and it lasts for maybe a day. Because the truth is, they're the fundamentals. If you don't have a vision for your business, for your life, then you're not building a business by design, you're not building a life by design, you're doing it by chance. If you've got a compelling vision but you don't have a tactical plan, then you've got a pipe dream. If those are solid but you don't have process control, then you're going to have a lot of inconsistency and a lot of frustration because some weeks you're going to execute, some you're not. If that's in play but you don't have the courage to measure, you're not keeping score, right? Then how do you make game time adjustments? How do you know what's working, what's not working? And if all that's solid but you're not intentional about what you say yes to and what you say no to, then the day's working you. You're not working your day. Now, I know you know this stuff. Again, big difference, though, between knowing and doing. And I really want to encourage you to apply it as a system. Because I know I've been in your seat, and you come here and you think, boy, if I can take one thing away today, it's a great day. Normally, I'd say that's fine. But I have higher expectations for you. Because applying it as a system is where you get the biggest benefit. Like any system, the sum of the whole is exponentially greater than the sum of the parts. And it's the areas we tend to shy away from that may have the biggest impact for you. So the analogy I like to use is, imagine yourself sitting on your sofa or in your lazy boy chair. You got your feet kicked up, you got your can of soda, you got your Doritos, you're watching the tube. And you think to yourself, you know, I'm going to run a marathon. Everybody's running marathons now. Seems really cool. I'm going to run a marathon. Would you go out the very next weekend and run a marathon? No. What might happen if you did? You might die, right? For most of us, it wouldn't be very pretty, would it? The likelihood of success would be really low. We might get injured. We might be hospitalized. But let's say it was more than a passing fancy. You were serious about it. Instead of immediately going out and trying to run this thing, what would you do? You'd train for it, wouldn't you? Here's the point. Big difference between training versus trying. Because no matter how hard you tried, if you weren't prepared, you're not going to be successful. But with training, you can prepare and be successful. Right? Same thing here. Training applies to more than just athletics. It applies to business, it applies to music, it applies to lots of areas. The 12-week year is a training process. And just like that marathon, if you went online and you found a process, there's probably aspects of that that look pretty good. Right? That carb loading, hey, I love pasta, I'm all in on that. There's also other aspects that aren't so pretty, that getting up at 5 a.m. and going 6 miles or whatever. I can't just pick the pieces I like, I gotta apply it as a system. Same thing here. If you pick a couple of these pieces, you'll get some benefit. You apply it as a system, you will get better. We've never had anyone apply it as a system and not get better. Okay? So I really want to encourage you to kind of have that mindset, that thinking that says, okay, I'm going to build this out as a system. Okay? All the disciplines. Okay, I also mentioned a set of principles, and there are 3 principles. I think of the disciplines as maybe strategies or approaches. I think of the principles as more character-based, and they're really the bedrock of success in life. And so I want to talk about them. There's 3 of them. And the first is accountability. And I want to start there because I think that may be the most misunderstood concept in business and society. In that most people equate accountability with consequences. In particular, negative consequences. Virtually everywhere you hear that word in a society, it's affiliated with bad behavior, poor performance, negative consequences. Give you an example. An athlete does something he or she's not supposed to do. Happens all the time now. And someone in authority like the commissioner calls a conference, stands before the world and says, we're going to hold this person accountable, and then what do they do with them? They punish them, right? They fine them, they suspend them, they spank them, some form of negative consequence. And it's like that. It's like this notion of accountability and consequences are one and the same when they're very, very different. Write this down for me. Accountability is not consequences. It's ownership. Accountability is not consequences, it's ownership. At the heart of accountability is free will choice. You always, 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 always have choice. Think about that. If I hired on with you and you had activity requirements for me, things I had to do day in and day out, do I have choice in that? Yes or no? Yes. I do, don't I? What are my choices? To do it or don't do it. And what am I choosing if I choose not to do it? To work somewhere else. Doesn't make me a bad person, makes me a bad fit. But here's the key. There's a big difference when I come at life as a choose to versus a have to. Because when life has a have to, it's very burdensome. It's very difficult. At best, I meet minimum standard. When I recognize all life is choice, my energy shifts. Now, it doesn't guarantee I'm going to like the choices. April 15th rolls around, you get the choice of paying your taxes or going to prison. Personally, I don't like either one of those. But you have choice. And that's the heart of accountability. It's the recognition that you don't control the circumstances, but you control how you respond. It's the understanding that the quality of your choices determines the quality of your life. And it impacts every area of your life. And yet, What I see is that for so many people, they're looking outside of themselves. They're waiting for someone or something to change. Right? They're waiting for the economy to settle down. They're waiting for the politicians to stop arguing. Good luck with that. Waiting for Geico to do less advertising. We're all tired of the lizard. How much of that do you control? None of it. None of it. What do you control? There's really two things: your thinking and your actions. And that's it. But it's enough if you take ownership of it. And if you're in a leadership position, whether you're leadership in your company, your family, your church, your community, it's a whole nother level to this. Every organization we've worked in every industry, and we've worked in them all, we hear people talk about holding their people accountable. Have you ever heard that? You ever used that maybe? I like to joke you can hold a baby or a bag of groceries, but you can't hold someone accountable. Because when we talk about holding someone accountable, when we peel that back, what we're really talking about is creating a negative consequence when they don't do what we want them to do. It's not accountability. That's consequences. Write this down if you're a leader. You'll never get discretionary effort. If you can spell, where are the spellers now? You'll never get discretionary effort with negative consequences. What do you get? You get just enough to stop the consequences. And it comes with collateral damage. I mean, think about the last time someone tried to hold you accountable. What's the natural tendency? To resist, right? To push back, to make excuses. It's the opposite of what you're trying to create as a leader. You're trying to force this accountability. Can you force someone to do something? Think about that. Can you force someone to do something? Yes or no? You really can't, can you? You might create a consequence that's negative enough that they choose to do something, but that's where all that collateral damage comes in. And that's what's happening when you're trying to hold people accountable. Stop doing that. One of my goals in life is to scrub that notion because it's holding you back. Stop trying to hold people accountable. Instead, hold them capable. What does that mean? It means you confront them with choice and the consequences of those choices. It's subtle, but it's profoundly different. How you think about accountability affects everything. From your ability to execute, to the results you get as an organization, your income, your health, every relationship you have, your happiness. The second principle ties pretty closely to that. That's the principle of commitment. And commitments can be powerful. Commitments, honestly, can be life-changing. There's a difference between interest and commitment. Check this video out. I don't know about you, I'd have closed the door. Coming from Michigan, I wish you would have. We got a bazillion of those things. But here's the thing, there's a difference between interest and commitment. When we're interested, we do it when circumstances permit. We're committed, we find a way to make it happen. And commitments are powerful, not just in the big things, but sometimes in what seems to be the littlest of things. I want to read this to you. Mick White started out as a client, became a friend. He sent this to me a number of years ago. He said, Brian, today is my 36th birthday. This has been on my heart for a while. It's time to share. Nearly 2 years ago, we went through 12-week training, and a lot has happened in those 2 years personally and professionally. And I want to share a story about how the 12-week year impacted me personally, as I know you hear all the time about the great things it's doing in our business. On the afternoon of the second day, we'd done a 2-day boot camp. You walked us through commitments. As I thought about what I was going to commit to, like Noah going after the mosquito, I wanted a true commitment that would change my life. I remember writing down my commitment, thinking to myself, I hope nobody else sees this, and I certainly hope Brian doesn't call on me to share my commitments. You see, I wrote down that I was going to call my mom every day, Monday through Friday. It seems simple, doesn't it? My mom and I had a beautiful relationship. She was my biggest cheerleader. I was her rock. There was no woman like my mother. From September 30th, 2009, June 11th, 2011, I called my mom every day, Monday through Friday. We took weekends off. It wasn't always easy to find the time during the day. It wasn't always convenient. Fortunately, I'm ashamed to say at times, it felt like a burden. However, I know this. It was the highlight of my mom's day. Each and every time I called, it was the highlight of her day. Now looking back, I realized it was the highlight of mine. Friday, June 11th, 2011 was the last day I ever talked to my mom as she died unexpectedly on Monday morning, June 13th. Because of that commitment I made on October 1st, 2009, my mom and I talked on the phone at least 440 times during those 88 weeks. I have some priceless voicemails, many, many wonderful memories, and a deeper relationship with my mom. And he goes on. But what strikes me about that is how this little activity, this little action, this benign action that he was actually embarrassed about could have such a profound effect when repeated time and time and time again. That's the power of commitment. Okay? It's not always in the big things. Sometimes it's the littlest things that over time can have the biggest impact. All right, if your mom's around, call her. She'd love to hear from you. Okay, I'm going to skip through these really quick because I'm close to out of time. 12weekyear.com is where you can find us. That back sheet has the Getting Started course, has some other things. We have a journal, we have the software, we do team training, we do one-on-one coaching, which has phenomenal results. So if we can help in any way, please reach out to us. We're not high pressure. All right, the last thing I want to share with you then is this principle of what we call greatness in the moment. And I don't know if you noticed, does life feel busier today than it was, say, 5 years ago? There's been a lot of research saying that most people feel like the pace of life is quickening and it keeps getting busier and busier, and I think technology tends to exacerbate that. It used to be back in the day, you'd leave work and the drive home was kind of where you're wound down. Now you're on the phone. And sometimes you pull in the driveway, you got to sit there in the driveway to finish the call, right? And it's like there's so many things that are just calling for our attention that it's really difficult to be mentally where we are physically. I know you've been in a conversation with someone and you're looking right at them and they're there physically, but you know they're somewhere else mentally. Or maybe you're being the person on the journey. Or how about this, when you're at work, you're thinking about home. The day ends, you drive home, you walk through the front door, and what are you thinking about? Work. Yeah, it's really challenging to be mentally where we are physically because there's so many things tugging at us. And yet, that's when you're at your best, when you're present in the moment. Athletes call that playing in the zone. When you're present, you tend to move through life with grace and ease. You're more resourceful, you're more creative. There's more joy in that. Now, that doesn't describe every moment, does it? Unfortunately, we have times when we're irritated, when we're pessimistic, when we're frightened. Those tend to be times, though, when we're one place physically and one other place mentally, sort of churning on things we can't control. The fact of the matter is you can't change the past. 1 minute ago exists as a memory. The future's not here yet. The hourglass, for me, is a great metaphor. Sand at the bottom's the past. It's the 1 minute ago. Sand at the top's the future. God willing, we get to live it. Where's life lived? It's one grain at a time, one moment at a time. And the more you can be present, the richer life is, even in difficult moments. It was nearly 14 years ago now. I was in St. Paul on business. We took a break, and I got a phone call from my wife, Judy, and I heard it in her voice immediately. She said, the biopsy came back, I have breast cancer. It was like somebody hit me in my stomach. I couldn't breathe. Judy was fairly young at the time for breast cancer, no family history of it. She would joke that, oh, this cancer stuff, she was healthy. And you know, how many of you dealt with that? How many of you dealt with a health scare like that? Okay, so you know what that's like. That separates what matters from what doesn't in a heartbeat, doesn't it? But it can be really stressful. And in the past, to escape the stress, I'd have mentally lived into the future, beyond the surgery, beyond the chemo, beyond the magic 5 years. But I'm so glad I didn't. we made a commitment to be present, not knowing if we were going to get 6 months or a couple years or what we were going to get. And there were times we called it going to the dark side when one of us would get really frightened. I'm just glad we were there for one another. Now, we've been blessed. My wife's cancer-free. We have 2 beautiful children. And, you know, I think, though, how we went through it has strengthened our relationship. I sure as heck wouldn't sign up for it. And they say lightning rarely strikes twice. About 6 years after her, I got cancer, went through the whole thing again. The numbers I saw are 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 Americans will get cancer in their lifetime. So we have these wonderful couples clamoring to be our friends, thinking statistically they're protected. I don't think that's how it works. But the fact of the matter is all you really have is the moment. Life is lived in the moment. Life happens in the moment. And I've got one more video clip for us. Ironically, it's Robin Williams. And it's from Dead Poets. And if you've seen the movie, he's a teacher in an all-boys prep school. And in this particular scene, he's got a freshman class day 1, and he's really talking to him about this concept. Let's take a look.
Well, come on. Oh, Captain, my Captain. Who knows where that comes from? Anybody? Not a clue. It's from a poem by Walt Whitman about Mr. Abraham Lincoln. Now, in this class, you can either call me Mr. Keating, or if you're slightly more daring, oh, Captain, my Captain. Now, let me dispel a few rumors so they don't fester into facts. Yes, I, too, attended Helton, and I survived. And no, at that time, I was not the mental giant you see before you. I was the intellectual equivalent of a 98-pound weakling. I would go to the beach, and people would kick copies of Byron in my face. Now, Mr. Pitts. It's a rather unfortunate name. Mr. Pitts, where are you? Mr. Pitts, will you open your hymn note to page 542? Read the first stanza of the poem you find there.
To the virgins to make much of time?
Yes, that's the one. Somewhat appropriate, isn't it?
Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. The Latin term for that sentiment is carpe diem. Now, who knows what that means?
Carpe diem. That seize the day.
Very good, Mr.
Meeks.
Meeks. Another unusual name. Seize the day. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Why does the writer use these lines?
Because he's in a hurry.
No. Ding! Thank you for playing anyway. Because we are food for worms, lads. Because believe it or not, each and every one of us in this room is one day going to stop breathing, turn cold, and die. I'd like you to step forward over here and peruse some of the faces from the past. You've walked past them many times. I don't think you've really looked at them. They're not that different from you, are they? Same haircuts, full of hormones, just like you. Invincible, just like you feel. The world is their oyster. They believe they're destined for great things, just like many of you. Their eyes are full of hope, just like you. Did they wait until it was too late to make from their lives even one iota of what they were capable? Because you see, gentlemen, these boys are now fertilizing daffodils. But if you listen real close, you can hear them whisper their legacy to you. Go on, lean in. Listen. You hear it?
Carpe diem, seize the day. Life happens in the moment, life is lived in the moment. Ultimately, greatness is created in the moment. It was years ago, I was in Salt Lake City, the Winter Olympics were on. I was there for business, but the athletes were coming and going. It was really cool to be around that. I started thinking about, when's an athlete become great? I thought, well, duh. When they do something like win a gold medal. But the more I thought about that, the more I realized that's not when they become great. I would argue that Michael Phelps didn't become great when he won 22 gold medals or whatever it was, but it happened years before that, really in a moment when he decided to do the things he needed to do. That those medals were simply the evidence of it, the confirmation of it. And it's the same for you and I. And yet I think too many people think if they're ever going to be great at some time in the future, when their income's at a certain level, their relationships look a certain way. The truth of the matter is you're either great in the moment or you're not. And either way, it's reflected in your future. And I think as you grasp that concept, it brings us back to where we started, which is what are you capable of? And like Edison, I believe you're capable more than you know. I've seen it. I've experienced it. And it's not complicated, but it's not necessarily easy. It takes courage to pursue what's in your heart. It takes character and discipline to act on it daily. It's not about being perfect. It's about living your best life, though. And as you do that, two things happen. One is you get more of what you want in life, which I think is a nice thing. The second benefit, though, which I think is even bigger, is it shapes who you become in the process. Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called The War of Art. Funky title, good little book. And in it he said most of us have two lives, and I agree with him. The life we live and the life we're capable of. And so as we wrap up, I want to thank you again for spending the morning with me. And I want to encourage you to never settle for anything less than the life you're capable of. Have a great 12-week year, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.